First time. Bonjour, Shwaikh. Manishi Kava and Disnikas. Nisi to Jack Grand is a bemoton and the matters with Nogum. And the Mitiwi Quetan Dunji. Hello, everybody. My name is Manishi Kave. I am a two-spirit elder. I am from Thunder Bay, Ontario, in Canada. I am here to say a prayer. Manitou, Kikakwitman Nongum, Juijish Nam, Chabaka the Manaway, Kawizagaki the Nanwangaman Nongum, Kagizagak. We just now went to Bumutuan, and the Matsuanan, to join them at the Yange. We went again to Mamquan and Gaga di Matrawa to Marking. Meanwhile, the Ska Akaziwat, meanwhile, the Snowbum Gavin Matrawat. No, the Ska Chamashkawaziwat, no Gab Mataziwat. Near in the Gokashi Kitian. Great Spirit, I ask you to guide us today for what we are about to do and what's going to happen today. Great Spirit, we ask you to guide us, to share our journey together, to share with one another, to embrace each other, to remember that love is with us. Great Spirit, I ask you to guide us home safely, and we ask you to guide us for today's event. Help us to embrace each other, to let each other know we are here together as one journey of our lifetime. Great Spirit, we thank you for all the gifts of life you give us today. We're not worried about tomorrow. Yesterday is gone. Just today we focus to be here with one another. We thank you, Miigwech.
Hi everyone, good morning, how are you? Good. Okay. Have you not had breakfast? All right, so we're getting into an end of, this is our final day, and we just want you to be aware of different things, very special things that are going to happen today, okay? So today we're going to have at 1 p.m. our closing panel with Bettina Washington, Rosa Moinde, and Akila Yarmogi, and this is going to be chaired by Matt. And then we'll have our closing keynotes at 1:45. And then there is a very
12:45.
12:45.
It says at 1, but don't listen to what it says. We're telling you we're going to begin a bit early at 12:45.
All right. And then also very important, we have the invitation to go around and visit different places in New Plymouth. And for that, we will have 3 hours today, all right? Everyone that wants to be dropped at downtown, we will have 2 vans outside the hotel, but you need to be on time. Please be on time at 3 p.m. Well, you'll be picked up again around 5 in the same place where you are going to be dropped. So be aware of it, minding the time. So we can continue at around 5:36-ish. All right. All right, that's all. So let's hear for our keynotes this morning. And thank you, Polly, for sharing this one.
Yes, thank you. We have 2 very distinguished speakers today, and I asked them how they wanted me to introduce them. And they said they would prefer to introduce themselves. So they have very impressive CVs, resumes, but I'm going to let them introduce themselves. And Malaka Shwaikh is going to go first.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace
Wa
be
alaikum salam.
upon you all. In 2013, I was awarded a scholarship to study for a master's degree in global politics and law in the United Kingdom. I remember that moment vividly, the joy, the disbelief, the excitement. As a 22-year-old Palestinian woman from Gaza, my family and I were thrilled. But also we were scared it might not happen. A year earlier, I had been offered a scholarship to study in the United States. I could not go as the borders were closed. And this time, just after receiving my UK scholarship, we hear the same news again. No Gaza students will be allowed to travel until further notice. My father said maybe it's better not to try, but I could not accept that. I remember my small act of protest at home. I cried, I argued, I begged to go. Finally, my father relented, and my brother Ahmed and I set off for the Rafah border crossing. We stopped for falafel sandwich on the way. If you have been to Gaza, you know how good that tastes. At the border, hundreds of students, were protesting the travel ban. I joined them. We stood in the sun and chanted, "Let students travel, let students travel." After hours of waiting, the border authorities agreed to let only 30 students cross the border. We gave them our passports for a random selection. When the names were called, mine was not on the list. The last name was Malak, and my name is Malaka. Malak did not respond when called. So they drew one more name. This time it was mine. In that moment, I jumped in disbelief. Only hours before, I did not know if I would even reach the border. And suddenly, I was holding a green card that meant I could try to leave Gaza the next day. I phoned my dad to tell him the news. Part celebration and part gentle, I told you so. That journey changed everything. When I arrived in England, I was one of the first women from Gaza studying and living there at that time. I was invited to speak about Gaza, and this border story that I've just told you was one of the first I ever told publicly. People often responded to me, "You are so resilient." They meant it as a compliment. But over time, I began to realize how complicated that word really is. For Palestinians, resilience is not a choice, it's an expectation, one often imposed from the outside. Those who appear resilient are celebrated. Those who can't keep going are forgotten. The focus shifts from the system that creates suffering to the individuals expected to endure it. I have 3 sisters in Gaza. One of them lives in the north and has had to evacuate multiple times between the north and the south during the latest Israeli aggression. For nearly a year, she and her 3 children lived in a tent in the south. With no schools left standing, the camp set up a small classroom in a tent, and it became the camp's school. Her work in that tent is admired. People call her resilient. But now she's back in the north, in a home still standing, but shattered by Israeli airstrikes. A few days ago, after yet another broken ceasefire, a missile hit her neighborhood. Shrapnel tore through her house. She told me, "My cupboard is upside down, filled with steel from the missile." She had no choice but to keep going, for herself, for her family, and for her children. And that is not resilient, it's survival. The expectation of resilience hides the violence behind it. Structural, colonial, and carried out with impunity. It tells the world we can survive anything, so it doesn't have to act. A comforting lie. They are resilient, they will cope. When people use that language, they often think they are honoring strength. But in truth, it can become a way of looking away, a way to live with injustice without feeling accountable for it. In 2019, the United Nations Development Programme, the UNDP, held a conference on Palestinian resilience and Sumud, Arabic for steadfastness. Ironically, it could not be held in Palestine. Instead, it took place in Jordan, easily accessible to West Bank Palestinians, while those from Gaza face long, dangerous, bureaucratic journeys through the Rafah border, or a slow, uncertain permit process via Israeli checkpoint. Rather than addressing the root causes that restrict freedom of movement for Palestinians, the organizers bypassed them, expecting Palestinians to overcome the very barriers that make resilience necessary in the first place. The world celebrates our resilience instead of confronting why we even need to be resilient. It's easier to romanticize resilience than to challenge the system that make it necessary. I first began to question the dangers of resilience expectation through conversations with my students at the university around 2021. They challenged me to think more critically, and my research deepened that reflection. Much of my research focused on prisons and hunger strikes in and beyond Palestine. Part of my research is in Belfast, Northern Ireland. And there I came across a mural that speaks powerfully about resilience. It reads, "Stop calling me resilient, because every time you say, oh, they are resilient, that means you can do something else to them. I'm not resilient." These are the words of Tracy Washington, president of the Louisiana Justice Institute, who said, as an urge for policymakers and the media to stop calling Hurricane Katrina victims resilient, saying, and I'm quoting, "We were not born to be resilient. We are conditioned to be resilient. I don't want to be resilient. I want to fix the things that create the need for us to be resilient in the first place." That is at the heart of it. We must fix what creates the need for resilience. When journalists describe places like Ukraine as civilized, and others, Iraq, Afghanistan, Palestine, Sudan, as not, they expose how the world divides whose pain is intolerable and whose suffering is expected. In 2022, Charlie Dagat, a senior foreign correspondent at CBS News, talked in an interview live about Ukraine, and I'm quoting, "This, referencing Ukraine, is not a place with all due respect like Iraq or Afghanistan. This is a relatively civilized, relatively European. I have to choose those words carefully. You would not expect that or hope that it's going to happen. So it's pretty human nature. It's a pretty human nature." Clearly, he did not choose his word carefully and instead feed into the violent and orientalist assumption of people in the global south as less civilized, thus bear with or cope with violence. This is unlike areas in the global south, in the global north, that are expected in orientalist terms to be more civilized and humane. In response to these binaries, Palestinian thinker and writer Edward Said wrote, "To be one of the colonized is to be many different but inferior things. This is how colonialism works, by dividing the civilized from the uncivilized, the resilient from the deserving." We must reject these binaries. In Palestine, generations have lived through trauma that is constantly ignored and then romanticized as strength, as heroism. But we should never be expected to hide our pain or to turn oppression into inspiration. The question should not be how do they endure, but why must they? It's time to move beyond resilience. We need resistance in the collective sense. Resistance means confronting structures, not glorifying survival. It means demanding accountability, not applauding coping. We need care, real and collective, not just the language of self-care that social media sells us. Because care without justice is comfort, and comfort without accountability becomes complicity. Rest and joy only means something when tied to justice, redistribution, and solidarity, as defined by the people who are most affected. So as we gather here today, let us remember, don't expect the oppressed resilience. Listen to their exhaustion and vulnerability, stand beside their struggle, and help address the systems that force them to be resilient in the first place. Because we don't want to be admired for surviving. We want to live justly, freely, and fully. Today, Joy has become the new fashionable brand, joy as resistance. We see it everywhere, influencers, books, and brands telling us to find our bliss, manifest abundance, and rest our way to success. But rest was never meant to be a wellness trend. Tricia Hersey and her work was a radical challenge to grind culture, a culture built on stolen labor and a call to imagine liberation beyond productivity. What was once radical has now been softened and sold back to us. Joy and rest have become aesthetics, marketing tools for individual healing, stripped of collective meaning. But joy on its own is not liberation. When it becomes an expectation, one shaped by those who are most privileged, most visible, and most secure, it stops being resistance and becomes denial. Rest and joy only have power when they are tied to solidarity. And solidarity must be solid, political, grounded, and loud. Too often, those with privilege tell others to be joyful or take rest while staying silent on injustice. That silence protect comfort. That silence protect comfort. That silence is not justice. It's hard, even cruel, to expect joy and rest as resistance, when genocides unfold, when bodies and freedoms are stripped away, when oppressed or when repressive systems turn care into content and activism into branding. We live in a time when hashtags trend faster than human lives are saved. The privileged can post slogans and can perform solidarity and then move on. That is neutrality disguised as care. But silence or neutrality is not safety, it's complicity. True solidarity must move beyond performance. It must be rooted instead in local needs, in truth, and in collective action. For joy to be real, it must make space for the full human experience, for grief, for vulnerability, for courage, and for resistance. Because to feel deeply, to grieve, to rage, to hope, in itself is an act of humanity. Joy must not only feel good, it must do good too. And that begins with us, refusing to be neutral, refusing to be silent, and refusing to let words like resilience or joy be stripped of their politics and sold back to us as comfort. Let us choose actions over aesthetics. Let's choose truth over trend. And let us remember that liberation, real liberation, is not a mere feeling, it's a right. I want to end with the words of New Orleans-based writer and director Zadashi Brown from 2022, when she said, "I dream of never being called resilient again in my life. I'm exhausted by strength. I want support, I want softness, I want ease, I want to be among kin, not patted on the back for how well I take a hit or for how many. Instead of hearing, you are one of the most resilient people I know, I want to hear, you are so loved, you are so cared for, you are genuinely covered." Thank you.
It's a song about love and belief and peace, and we wish it for all.
Thank you.
Malaka, thank you for such a moving and profound speech. And I don't know about all of you, but when her very profound and remarkable research is accompanied by story, I feel like I can carry that with me in my body and my heart. I don't need to look at my notes. So thank you for sharing with us such an enduring message. I'm going to turn now to Asmi, and I'm sure that we will have, again, a very moving and meaningful presentation for all of us.
Cure Hood. I thank the elders, the ladies, the sisters, the aunties of this land for giving me permission to speak on this beautiful land that your ancestors have cared for from time immemorial. Not in the English sense, but in the sense that this is the land that was entrusted to these people by the Creator Spirit. And they have allowed us to walk gently on their land. They have allowed us to speak on their land, which is an absolute privilege. And to be here with them and other Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people from around the globe. My name is Asmi Wood. I am a descendant of the people from the Western Torres Straits in the land that they now call Australia after colonization. Colonization is such a pervasive, ugly, dehumanizing process that becomes invisible to most people after a while. You are on colonized land, I am on colonized land, and so are a lot of other people. We heard the story from Raza, and if I can repeat her greeting, which is nicer than me saying good morning to you, because I don't think it means anything. So, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Barakallahu fi. My talk is about peace, education, decolonization, and how we can achieve this. Clearly, what I'm going to tell you in 20 minutes is not going to work. I mean, we've been trying this for 250 years. So, but let me give you some ideas of how we, as the first peoples of that continent that they now call Australia, are surviving and looking to work with our sisters, our brothers, and particularly our aunties from all parts of the world to bring peace. So when we speak about speaking to each other, I speak to you, but with me come my ancestors, going back to the first woman and the first man. And so do you. And when we speak to each other, our ancestors speak to each other. So there can't be other than peace. How can you kill somebody who you're talking to in this way and with all our ancestors are conversing with? So the indigenous way, I think, helps to bring peace. But it's not inevitable, as we can see in Gaza, the Sudan, in Ukraine, in Central African Republic, and everywhere. And here, where everything looks beautiful on the surface, but particularly our young men struggle with the police, with authorities, where our hearts are broken. Every day, our lives are taken, our bones are broken. But I'd like to remember the poem of this beautiful man called Rumi from Turkey, whatever it's called, that when our hearts are broken, the Creator Spirit creates a space for light to enter into our hearts, and that will create healing. I'm not saying that we have to all wait for that, but it gives us resilience. I know that resilience doesn't sound good, but for us who have to survive hundreds of years, we do need to have resilience, because our colonizer is never going to give us the tools to dismantle his colony. We have to create it for ourselves. We have to work towards doing that. So decolonization in the contemporary world is a word that's used a lot. Decolonization for what they called blue water colonies, that is colonies, say, of England, India, Nigeria, Malaysia, that are thousands of miles from the mother country, has occurred to some extent. I'm not saying that decolonization is perfect, because it's political decolonization. The economic, social, military links continue in a different form, but perhaps in a less visible form, because our leaders are complicit in this. It's a new form of decolonization. Our minds are colonized, and we have to learn to decolonize that. And don't ask me how to do it, because I haven't figured it out. When I do, I'll tell you, and if you have, then tell me. But my sister here, she is decolonized. She is the most beautiful woman in the world. She's an elder, And she knows how to do it, so I'm trying to learn from her how to do it. But as peoples, we have together come to agree on this instrument, international instrument called the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. It's not perfect, it's far from perfect, but it gives us a place to start as a collective, as collectives mainly of people who are in metropolitan colonies. So the blue water colonies are the colonies that are far away from Britain, France, wherever. Metropolitan colonies are colonies like you have in IPRA, in what they call Australia, where hundreds of countries, like in Australia, it's about 250 or 300 different countries living together, are together, but we are now so inextricably linked with and mixed with our colonizers that extrication becomes very difficult. And we have to use a method that is different than the blue water colonies, because in a sense that's easier. This is a little bit more complicated because our elders, certainly in Australia, and I can't speak for anybody else, our elders, and our elders speaking, almost every one of them, she said, we will do this peacefully. I know that's not an option for some countries, it's not. But for us, perhaps it is. But it's also coming from a place of weakness. We are 3% of the population in Australia. Half my family are non-Indigenous, or more than half. How do we extricate this? But as Kelly and Tony were talking about, children have this habit of being able to move into these colonized spaces and speak our truths in a way that they wouldn't otherwise listen, because it comes from their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren. Maybe there is hope there. So,
No, we've only used 5 minutes.
oh, okay. So when we talk about fighting this system, and I'm using the term loosely, I'm a pacifist by nature. I don't want to fight if I don't have to. And watching you beautiful people yesterday do your presentation without speaking, through your bodies and through your actions and through your faces, I was so scared when I saw it, and sad at the end. It's difficult as a lawyer because we always use words, we charge by the word, so of course we try and use as many words as we can to, quite the opposite of what those beautiful dancers were doing. But it talks about it shows us the banality of evil. The family minding its own business becomes militarized, I have an example which I hope you don't mind me citing, and that was from the ICTY, the International Criminal Court, Tribunal for the ex-Yugoslavia, where this man, and it could have been any man, as he said, who'd lived next to his Bosnian Muslim neighbor, I think for 20 years, the fact sheet said. It's difficult sometimes to speak through translators because not everything comes through. And I had to cross-examine him later, but they have different rules in the criminal court. And I was allowed to get some extra information from him, not coerced. There were people there was no force, he had the right to speak. But I was just hurt, curious, to see, why did you rape this woman next to whom you'd lived for 20 years? But, if not more, why, how do you do this? Why do you do this? What are you trying to achieve? And this woman is pregnant now, and she had a daughter. And if you're trying to colonize through that woman is wearing a headscarf. What's wrong with you? This doesn't work even on a practical. And he said, you would do the same thing if it happened to you. You would rape your neighbor. And it just scared me. And when I watched the acting yesterday, I just thought of that man and what he had said, of how ordinary people, I don't know, whatever that means, are brought to this position of utter depravity, because I can't think of anything else. It doesn't matter whether it's me or anybody else. When you do these things, it must be depraved. We can't have definitions that don't comply with the ordinary meaning of words and thoughts. And if we are all capable of doing this, how do we inoculate ourselves from these kinds of diseases? Our aunties tell us that the indigenous way is the way to live, that we take the gifts given to us by our creator spirit, because we use it in the singular. And we remember, we are thankful for what we receive, we are grateful for where we are, and that we will continue to do things. There's actually a saying in Arabic that sometimes we ask for things that are not good for us, and we are displeased with things that are good for us. So perhaps, in our culture, we refer to our elders, our elders in our community. She tells us as best she can. It's not that it's a one-way street. She listens to us. I mean, anything to do with law or business, she will talk to other people. It's not a democracy. It's not an autocratic system. It is a consultative process. And I think the Arabs use this word, we should 10 minutes ago. Thank you. So how do we get our like in a 3% in Australia, or it's 15% Maori, so 85% non-Indigenous in Aotearoa. How do we get to this position of decolonizing? So decolonizing, as I said, with Blue Water is through the UN process. For us, we can't go through that process. It doesn't work. And these countries that have already achieved independence or political independence have now joined the side of the colonized states to carry on a world order that benefits them. So it was all very good when you're on the losing side. As soon as you join the winning side, you swap coins. It's like they're saying, when you're 20, if you're not a communist, there's something wrong with you. And if you're 40 and a communist and want to share everything when you're 40, then there's something wrong with you, because you need to learn to be selfish. So this is the kind of thing with nation states as well, that they have now become the majority and are very reluctant to move from a paradigm of self-determination for peoples to this idea of territorial integrity of existing nation states, because that helps them. So for us in Australia, what is the option? We don't want to assimilate. I can speak English, but I'm not an Englishman. I don't want to be an Englishman. I never will be an Englishman. There's nothing wrong with being English, but that's not for me. I see Maori and how proud they are, with their beautiful mokus on their face. This is who we are. This is our God-given land, and we will not budge an inch from where we are. You can do what you will, but we will not move, and we will not change. Part of the war of decolonization is killing people, yes, of course. But, sad as it is, it doesn't really achieve much, because the next generation grows up, like with my Serbian, I don't know whether to call him, I won't call him a friend, but, colleague, I guess, because he's another human being. What happens is that, you're perpetrating what was there already. It just continues. So what colonizers do is epistemicide. That is what you have to do. If you want to kill a society, you have to kill its knowledge base. You have to kill its knowledge production. You have to kill everything, not just its people. So epistemicide is what they have done in countries like here, where we're standing on, and in Turtle Island and other places where indigenous people are a very small minority. how do we recreate our knowledge systems? In Australia, we say that the earth, the land is the source of our law. So it will come back to us. It doesn't matter how much they try and kill us. And it's, I guess, an article of faith. It's a belief that either you take or you don't take it. It's, I'm not here to dissuade you from your own cultural and legal roots. But for us, that seems to work. But how do we encourage our 97% non-Indigenous people to help us? So law, once war is over and the land has been subdued, as they say, then law is the colonizing force. And you can't decolonize when the law is the colonizing force. I mean, how do you do that? It's a contradiction. What we have to do is to help to change the law to a way that is not colonizing in its essence. And in Australia, what we're trying to do is to speak to young lawyers, mostly non-Aboriginal lawyers, non-Torres Strait Islander lawyers, and tell them your law, you have admitted, is based on lies. You said that our land was empty, but it wasn't. We're here, we're not holograms. And your court, your highest court, has admitted that. So, but you continue as if nothing has happened. You say that this land was taken peacefully, and yet you dig up mass graves everywhere. That can't be true. Law doesn't call these lies, it calls them legal fictions. But you know what a fiction is? Yeah, a fiction is fiction, you make things up. And law, you know what law is? So legal fiction is here, we make things up as we go along to suit us. It is by speaking truth, by admitting truth, and by negating these legal fictions. And that's where we have to start. And we'll do this peacefully as we can, because our aunties have said that we should, that's how we should go. And we will find economic strength to do what we can. So I thank the aunties in the country where I work, where they set up a trust of $50 million to help young Aboriginal women and men. I wish there were more men. It is a pity that our young men are not coming through as quickly as our young women, but we'll deal with that problem in a secondary stage. And Auntie Anne Martin, who was instrumental in setting up this scholarship, is to help our people come through and learn their language and learn their law. Malcolm X said, if you don't learn the English language and if you don't learn the English law, you will never liberate yourself, because these are the two tools that they use to oppress us. We need to understand it. So we have taken the advice of elders of our land and other lands. And if the process of indigenizing, which is also a term that I put in my abstract, is to help non-Indigenous lawyers, law students to be lawyers, to learn an agreed factual base. And these facts don't come from us, they come from their own side. Good people in these white communities, and there are so many of them, because they are human beings like us, they know what is right, they know what's wrong. As the Bible says, it's not money that corrupts, but it's the love of money that corrupts. So when people become exceedingly wealthy, they become very corrupt, and it's the same as power, I guess. But people who are not in this group of obscenely wealthy people have good minds and good hearts, and they can understand what we're saying. And they're happy to allow their children to learn the truth and find a legal accommodation where we can engage as peoples descended from a common ancestor. We may have different colors and sizes and shapes and languages, but our children in our community can marry your children and have viable offspring that are productive and can have children. That is the definition of a species. So we are a single species. Why do they dehumanize us to a point that this epistemicide has allowed us to get to this point where we have got to. And for people to come in, I've heard so many people coming to Australia and say, oh, this is such a peaceful, beautiful country. I've heard the same thing in Aotearoa. This is such a peaceful. Yes, my beautiful brother, yes, my beautiful sister, the war is over, but the war is still going on by other means. Law is the way in which we are controlled, we are colonized, and we will fight back, not with weapons, but through the law. And the interface between legal systems, our legal systems and theirs, between our legal systems, their legal systems, and the international legal regime is something that we can navigate. It is something to which we have access. And this is not an advertisement for my university, but again, this is the Aboriginal elders, Auntie Anne Martin and Auntie Matilda House, two of our senior leaders, our leaders from slightly different jurisdictions, which I won't go into, have created a system where we bring Indigenous people from around the world to our university to give them the tools that they need to access the international legal regime. The French speakers have asked us to do the same for them, and I wish we can, because they've had a French program, and 8 of the women who participated in the French program have disappeared when they got back home. So we need to be careful. War is still going on, but we will fight peacefully. So it's time. Okay. Just to conclude, I'd like to say, law is how we will fight our battle. And we will try to encourage our non-Indigenous brothers and sisters who have the capacity to work with us and who have the heart to work with us to fight this good fight with us. I wish you all very well. Thank you for this fabulous conference, and hope to see you around. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Asmi. I will turn it over to questions in just a moment, but I just wanted to reflect on a very strong connection and call I hear from both of our speakers, is that whatever country we live in, I live in a settler colonial country. So to make sure that we wade into those complexities and we engage with that network in ways so that there's no need to call for resilience, that we've changed the laws, that we've changed the ways of knowing and being in our country. So appreciate that very much. That's definitely something I will take home in my heart. And I turn it to the audience for questions. Do we have a microphone runner somewhere? Yes, we do. Questions, reflections? Yes.
I'm just wondering, you mentioned that Indigenous men aren't coming through as much as Indigenous in Australia.
Sorry, could you hear me? And I was just wondering why that is.
I don't know why that is. I think what I've heard people say is that it's, well, I mean, this is a very general statement, and I mean no disrespect to any man or woman who is in here or anything else, is that men are easier to corrupt. Men are easier to corrupt. And till men get to a certain age, it's difficult to trust them with leadership. I know other cultures have different ways of thinking, and it's no disrespect to we are all different. We all have our own ways of doing things. But I know that in our cultures, that for the first, since the liberation, I guess to a certain extent, access to education, the closing of homelands and the missions, and the forced feeding of Christianity. I don't mean Christianity in its real sense. Jesus Christ, peace be upon him, would never have told people that it is okay for the vicar to sleep with this young boy or this young girl. Surely he couldn't have said that. And yet that is the Christianity that was practiced. The Catholics did it, the Anglicans did it, the Protestants did it, And even within the Jewish communities in Australia, it had happened. So these things continue to happen. But, and I'm not saying women are perfect, of course they're not, I mean, I'm sure you can corrupt women, but perhaps not as easily as you can. So that has been something that has fed through. And the other side of the coin is that alcohol has become easy. So, initially it was, in a way, when they starved us, it was better because we didn't get drunk as well. But now, the women have said, we want dry communities. We don't want drugs, we don't want alcohol, and we don't want pornography in our communities. And what do they say? Oh, you're taking away the right of black people to access to this. Well, if you want to drink, go to Darwin or to Brisbane. There are thousands of pubs there. Go and get pissed as much as you want. Don't bring it into our communities and rape our women. So sometimes anti-discrimination laws are a part of the problem, and our young men are falling prey to this. Some of our young women are too. There was a program in Australia where they wanted to increase the population of people who were there. And they said, anybody who has a child, we will give them, I think, $20,000. I can't remember, some amount of $1,000. So what did the young girls do in the Aboriginal communities? They all got pregnant. And at 16 and 14, they were having children, collecting the money. And you think, hey, sister, do you think you can look after this kid with this pittance that they've given you? Oh, no, grandma will look after the kids now. I can go and buy myself a toy or whatever with the money. So money corrupts, and I guess our young men, and I know if there are Aboriginal people here, I'm going to go out and get beaten outside to a pulp. But this is my view, and unfortunately, that's what I think. Sorry, go on.
No, we still have a question?
I know we shouldn't become that which we fight against. But am I wrong? I'm struggling with this because am I wrong to feel that those who inflict these injustices, this genocide, that they should suffer as well and be banished?
So we have had genocide on our lands. It is a genocide that has been covered. It's harder to do it now. I mean, if what is happening in Gaza had happened maybe 30 or 40 years ago, maybe nobody would have known about it. Certainly when our Jewish brothers and sisters were killed in World War II, nobody knew about it. And these happened quietly. It's harder to do now. But no, we don't want to do that to anybody else. It is like racism. If it is wrong for you to say that I'm less or stupid or whatever else you want to call me because of the color of my skin, then it's equally wrong for me to turn around and tell you you are X, Y, or Z because of the color of your skin. No, it is when we give in to these urges to take life, to take property, to take what is not ours in an unlawful way, that leads to genocide. No, so we don't want to become like that. And this is why our aunties have said, we will fight back peacefully.
I mean, really building on that, I guess accountability is at the heart of the justice process wherever we are. And I want maybe to focus on one particular point of how we all can be part of this accountability process and what we can do in our own positions, whether we are teachers, activists, dancers, what we can do to make sure first that we raise awareness about what happened in Gaza, but also elsewhere where there are oppression, where there's any form of oppression, how we can educate people around us about what has happened and how we can make sure that it will never happen again. Write about it, speak up, use social media. I think all these things will hopefully get us closer to a proper accountability mechanisms. And I'm thinking more particularly of delegates here who are coming from, for example, the United States, and the United States has a lot of power when it comes to the Gaza question. We've seen the United States, for example, when it comes to vetoing some decisions related to the Gaza question. So how can we get into a position in which the United States does not veto these decisions, and we can get closer to put sanctions on the Israeli state, for example? How can we make sure that we get into justice through that? So I want to invite all of us to actually be part of this justice process, because it's not a question only for the Gaza population to get us closer to justice and accountability. It's a question for all of us, similar to what has happened, of course, in the South African context. And it's because of international pressure, the boycott and the sanction process has succeeded. So how can we all make sure that we're part of this process?
Sorry, can I just add that I don't mean that you don't try people who are alive. I'm speaking about the context of places like Australia and New Zealand and the United States, where the genocides were committed many years ago, and those people are no longer with us, and they'll face a different court in our understanding. But for contemporary wars, whether it's in Israel and Palestine, or in the Central African Republic, or in Sudan, when we have the chance of bringing people to court, whether it's Mr. Netanyahu or Mr. Putin or whoever else, nobody's saying that they're guilty till they've been tried, but the prima facie evidence strongly indicates that they are. But let the court processes show them that if they're innocent, then let that speak. But we know the evidence, and as many lawyers have very forensically gone through this evidence, the chances are that they would be found guilty. But no, it is not to allow people to get away with it. Sorry, I answered the question.
Can I ask thank you for sharing your truth and wisdom with us. Malaka, you had mentioned your understanding of resilience has deepened through conversations with your students. And I'm wondering if you could say a little more about that and what that learning process has been like.
Yeah, definitely. So I teach at the University of St. Andrews, and I focus mostly on peace building and mediation. And one of the courses that I teach is a third-year course called Conflict Management, Settlement, and Resolution. So it's more a course from the colonial, critical, and intersectional perspective of understanding these concepts. And one of the week we actually speak about language and discourse in conflict and peace. So we speak about things like voicelessness, empowerment, resilience, and there were just a lot of conversations about that. And I remember one of the students wrote in a blog one day about a poem that she came across in one of her classes, history class in the United States, which is about a rose that come out of the soil without any resources that would make that rose flourish and grow. And she was like, it doesn't seem possible to have that rose coming out despite not having any resources to make it grow. And then that student linked it to resilience and be like, it's kind of like similar to resilience discourse as well. Like we should not be expected to flourish and be ourselves without having resources around us that allow us and enable us to be ourselves. And that's where it comes from. And I remember having a conversation with one of my colleagues in Trinity College, Dublin, who also wrote about the same kind of concept. And he introduced me, for example, to that mural in Belfast, Don't Call Me Resilient. Don't call me resilient, because every time you say that, they are resilient, that means you can do something else to me. So through these conversations and through understanding, for example, that there is nothing like voicelessness. There are no people who are voiceless. There are structures that allow or enable particular voices to reach us or not reach us. And then empowerment, for example, it came from Paulo Freire's work in Brazil. And it's about consciousness, like political consciousness, and how consciousness is relevant to knowledge production, rather than just kind of empowering people in ways that fit particular way of thinking and particular way of knowledge. And even though, like, we think of the way that we might understand empowerment, for example, in the literal sense, is through giving people power, but this is not what empowerment that we know about, right? Like in Gaza, for example, we know in a particular year, there were a lot of funding to empower girls in Gaza to ride bicycles. And I was like, it's amazing, right? Like, it's amazing to, of course, allow women to focus on that. But there was just so much attention on this particular initiative in Gaza and forgetting of like other, political contexts and like, ongoing occupation and stuff like colonialism that also deserve particular attention. So empowerment is becoming this, form of, like just a way of empowering people, but in a particular way that fit particular discourses, rather than asking people on the ground, how would you like us to empower you? How can we actually amplify and center these voices rather than think for them or impose our own way of thinking on them? These conversations happen in the classroom, and I work with the students as well. Like, we write together, we present together, and I think of teaching also as a two-way process, rather than me being in the classroom teaching the students, but I also learn from them and they learn from me. So it's a collaborative process in some way or another. I hope that answered the question. I feel like I went to the rant in a way.
If you're like me, you could continue this conversation for much longer, but if I'm correct, we're at time. Is that right?
Just to the for Christians, inviting you to